Creepers left and right, buzz like crazy. Everybody's trying to stimulate it. Spiders in the mirror and things can't be right. Back to the scene of a Friday night, to a blessed collision still frozen tight. Spear drinkers, Cupid and the sound of her first chime. And why did you argue? We're dreaming of those eyes, the best part of my life. And when we make love, babe, don't make a sound, the clock won't turn around. Ooh, you turn around, 2,000 little fires. And ooh, your circle is spreading. Slowing things down when I wanted to race, catching up again when you cherry to.
Hello my friends, hello, welcome back to another vlog. Hello, so today is Tuesday. I thought I would do another weekly vlog, and I know it's like super, and I feel this way too, like themed reading vlogs I think are definitely more popular. But I'm always constantly like in the middle of several different books, and last week when I vlogged, it was kind of difficult to narrow it down to just two. Like I was reading other books along with the two that I vlogged about. So I don't know exactly what's going to be in this vlog. Obviously this is my opening clip, so we'll see when I get to editing this at the end what I actually ended up including. But as of right now, I thought I would just go over what I am currently reading as of this moment. So the book that I'm reading physically, that I am continuing from last week and probably will be continuing for a really long time, is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. So this is the first time I've read this book. I joined a book club on Fable with this. I haven't really participated in the book club much, but that was the whole reason why I decided to pick this up, is because it was like broken down into sections for weeks, because this is like 1,000-page book. This is high epic fantasy. I have read a lot of Brandon Sanderson's books, but this is the one series of his that I have been avoiding for a very long time because it is so long, and also because it is so hyped. Like, I feel like of all of his books, this one gets so much hype and people really, really love it. And it is super long. Like, it's over 1,000 pages. I think it's over 1,000 pages. I'm reading it on my Kindle. I also have like a physical copy, but I also have the audiobook, which I haven't broken into yet. So far I've only been reading it on my Kindle. So I am, on my Kindle it says that I'm 16% of the way through, and I've been reading it for a little over a week, and honestly, I am loving it. Like, I didn't really know what to expect going into this, but because I've read so many of his books before, I know his writing style really well, and I also know his storytelling, and I know that for me, some of his books are easier to get into than others. But I was really, I guess, dubious about how quickly I'd be able to get into this book, just because it's so freaking long. So it's interesting that of all of the books of his that I've read, like I've read a lot of his YA and adult books. I've read The First Generation of Mistborn, I've read Warbreaker, Elantris, Tress of the Emerald Sea, the sci-fi YA, a couple of his sci-fi series that I read. One of them I read with my son because I thought, you know, it's really actually hard to find. You probably know if you have kids or boys, but it's very hard to find books for boys that are like in the 12 to 15 range or something like that. It feels like once it gets to that point, books almost entirely get focused for girls, and it's hard to find books for boys. So Brandon Sanderson had a couple of young adult series, and my son really, really loved those. I didn't love them as much. Like, they definitely feel catered to a teenage boy. The one, I can't remember what it's called, Steelheart, I think, is maybe the first in the series. But anyway, The Way of Kings. So I'm still kind of not entirely sure what the overall plot is. Obviously, there's a war, there's fighting, there's freeing people from oppression. At this point, we have someone named Kaladin who was in an army. He was a great warrior, and then he gets somehow sold into slavery, and so now he is a slave trying to break free and survive. And we just had this really, really powerful moment at the end of chapter 11 with his character that was sort of this moment where he was thinking, like, maybe, spoiler, if this is going to be a spoiler for this scene, where he was finding his life to be so miserable. He had lost his will to fight, his will to live, and he went to this place where slaves in this area go to just end it all, basically. And he's standing right on the precipice of this, and this little, almost like a sprite type of thing, comes to him and brings him this reminder that she hadn't forgotten him and that she was still thinking of him, and that's the thing that, like, pulls him back from the edge. And now he's back in the mind space of being the warrior that he was before, you know? So it's really, really great. I'm honestly really loving it. So we also have, at this point, there were a couple of different points of views in the beginning, but then it kind of narrowed into just Kaladin and then Shallan. I'm not sure if I'm saying these names right because I'm just reading it, I'm not listening to the audio. And Shallan is a woman whose father has died and her whole family is deeply in debt, and she's trying to save them. And so she goes to this very wise woman who's like in her mid-30s. She goes to her to try and become her apprentice because she has a plan that if she works for her, then she's going to be able to save her family. So it's very interesting, very subtle in some ways and not subtle in other ways, plot threads of what is happening here. But, you know, I'm just really impressed with this book, and I'm impressed with the story and the characters, but I'm really, really impressed with how I would just want to keep reading it. Like, every time I have to put it down, I'm sad. Like, I don't want to stop reading it. I just want to continue reading it. So that's the book that I'm physically reading. I'm not sure how much more I will update you on that because I know I'm not going to finish it this week. So the other book that I am currently reading, which is taking up a lot of my focus also, is North and South. This is a buddy read with Jen from the book Refuge. We're a huge fan of the BBC North and South. Obviously, we love that show. We've talked about that quite a few times. And Jen and I have been talking about buddy reading this for a long time. And finally it came to the point where she's like, are we actually going to do this or not? Because if you're not going to do it, then I'm going to do it without you or something. And I was like, no, let's do it. Let's do it. So I'm reading that. She has broken it down into chapters for us every day. So I just barely finished today's chapters, and those ones are, you know, if you know the basic story of North and South, it's this family, a father, a wife, and the daughter is the main character that we follow, and they are living in this very charming town that is not necessarily like super well-to-do, but is not in like the working district of London or things like that. And the father is in the clergy, and he has this sort of loss of faith, and he decides he cannot be a clergyman anymore, and so he's going to pull his family out of their pastoral home basically and take them to the city. And that's where we find our heroine meets Mr. Thornton. And so at this point Mr. Thornton and Mary have just met, and they are already forming assumptions of one another. It's very reminiscent of Pride and Prejudice in that way. And I think that the way that they meet in this book, I was really surprised also with how much he swooned and fell for her right away. And, you know, granted, most of him falling for her is because she's beautiful. Like, there's a lot of talk about her pretty face, and, like, it's a thing that she's just a beautiful, beautiful woman. Like, people just fall in love with her all the time because of her beauty. But I really did enjoy their first meeting, and I also found it very interesting to read the book when you've seen the show and seeing how, I feel like the book obviously goes into more detail about things, but something that it did go into a lot more detail is how much the father's decision to change their entire life and to pull them out of where they are, how much that affected the whole family, and they can do nothing about it, you know? So I'm really enjoying this. You know, I don't find the writing style hard to read at all. It's very easy, very engaging. I mean, in the beginning I was probably more aware of the writing style because it does something that's very typical of the time period, where it tells the story, but then it sort of breaks off and it will describe things overly, like the setting or the trees or the land or even the characters, what they're wearing. And then it will also sort of go into this inner monologue that is the narrator, like the almost the omniscient point of view, which I actually am not sure what point of view this is, because we kind of have switched from Mr. Thornton's to Mary's in third person, you know? And at first I was like, oh yeah, this is very reminiscent of the time period, of a classic of this time period. That was a very common writing style, but it's not a barrier for me. I'm really, really enjoying it. I have read quite a lot of classics in my life, so it's not something that I'm unfamiliar with, but it's been a while since I've read a classic, so to go back, well, I guess it's been a couple of years. 2 years ago I read Persuasion, and you know, this doesn't have the sharp wittiness of Jane Austen, but it's still just solid storytelling and great writing. So those are what I'm reading, that I've made progress on so far. Now, the other book that I want to read, that I am going to read, is Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. So I did get an audio arc of this from Libro FM, and I want to read this and review it. I really want to read this before I hear too much chatter about it, because something with Ali's books, I really like her books, but I have found that if I let too much, like if I hear other people's opinions of her books too much, usually in a way that is kind of negative, and I really like her books, then I'm not super excited about reading them. So alright, that's what I'm reading. Thank you for joining me on this vlog so far. I'll see y'all in my next clip when I have some more to update you about. Hello my friends, we are back in my car, but I'm holding you because the light, it looks pretty like on my face right here, but the light is coming at a weird angle, so I can't set you up where I usually do. But I have a couple of doctor appointments today. I'm in between them, and so I thought I would update you on this reading vlog. So most of my reading time has been reading North and South, which I'm really enjoying a lot. I need to go back and look at the clips that I filmed talking about it before, because I don't really remember what I had to say about it. But I do really love this. It's a very good read. If you love the show, I think you would equally enjoy the book. It's just a good time. But I also got a little further along in The Way of Kings. Nothing really new to report there, but one kind of major change is I have decided to possibly temporarily, possibly permanently DNF Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. I started this, and you know, I like Ali Hazelwood. I haven't read all of her books. I think the one right before this I never ended up reading, although I have it. And I do want to get to that, because, which is, I think, Love Theoretically. I do want to get to that because I feel like a lot of people love that one. But I really like this author's writing. I think she does a really good job with just her writing style. It's very consumable. I like the characters she builds. I like her romances for the most part. But this one, I only got a few chapters in, but already I can feel this is taking a much different direction. Like, I really honestly have come to associate Ali Hazelwood with slow burn romances, which is my preference. I really like that. Unless you can really show me a convincing reason why the couple has to have, you know, explosions right off the bat physically, I don't really know why I should enjoy that, you know? Like, that's just my personal preference. And so I saw that this was really headed in that direction of, like, they're gonna physically get together, and that's gonna be the majority, the basis of the relationship, and that's what's gonna be most of the book. And so I was just getting those vibes. It feels like it's going to be a lot like a physically based relationship, or at least that's going to take up a lot of the book, and I don't want to read that right now. I don't have really any tolerance for that at the moment, especially because I feel like for the most part, Ali Hazelwood to me is just a fun romance. Like, they're not super deep, they're not super emotional, they're just fun romances, you know? They're just fun, enjoyable, engaging romances that I have a good time reading. So, but I think that's largely because of how I enjoy how she creates her romances in a slow burn type of way. Like, the first book that she wrote, what the heck is The Love Hypothesis, is still probably my favorite. I just really, really like how she builds her romances, and I just don't want to read one from her that is purely based on Steam. And I have looked at a few reviews when I decided to kind of DNF, because I was like, is this going in the direction I think it is? And a couple people said it did lean too far in the physical. Like, one of those was Christy Reads a Lot. Her review I thought was really good. She didn't give away spoilers, but she did say it looked like it was more physical than anything else. And I'm not here for that right now. I don't really care. I don't really want that. So, and really the final deciding factor on if I was going to DNF this or not is because this is an audio arc, and I always feel bad DNFing those. Like, first of all, I didn't get it read on time. Second of all, I'm DNFing it, but I may come back to it. But the deciding factor is that I have a hold on, well, I have checked out the Mary Bellog historical romance that I want to read. Can't remember the title. I'll put a picture right here. I'm so sorry I've had to edit out names I have said wrong, titles. Like, I'm not dumb, but sometimes, especially when I'm on the spot, like, names and titles escape me. So I mean, you can think I'm dumb if you want, but I'm not dumb. Anyway, this hold expires, or my checkout goes back in a few days, and I really want to read this, especially because there are like 5 people waiting for it. So this is the one I'm going to go with now. This is Jenny, who has a disability from the previous book, and then the son of the Ravenswood family, who is like the byblow. So I'm very, very excited about this. I have some thoughts, but I've got to run into the doctor right now. I'll let you know what they are in a little bit.
Staring out the window on a cloudy morning, trying to lick her wounds while the tea is swarming. Sometimes it's like a bird that's never shipped out. Sometimes you go around on a never-ending rail. This week has been a mess, but I'm gonna tell you, we're a bit at work, gonna make it brand new. We're gonna put away for a comeback. We only need some time, and I promise you that. Promise you that. I promise you that. I know this can take a while, but it's gonna be alright, girl. And if it won't be today, the shoulder you can cry on. So cry if you wanna cry. Small rainbows will fill your eyes. You cry if you wanna cry.
Hello, my friends. Well, have I got some stuff to talk about today. So, first thing that I want to talk about is North and South. I am currently, well, I have this much left. A little less. I'm a little over halfway through with this. So, I am finding this to be a very interesting reading experience. And interesting in, like, such a good way, because I think that I was not expecting this book to read as romantically as it does. There are several scenes in here where we very specifically are in Mr. Thornton's head when he is thinking about Margaret, and that is really where the romantic part is getting me at this point, because I think at this point Margaret is just starting to realize that she is having feelings for him as well. And anyway, there was this moment where she dives in front of him to protect him, right? And she gets injured. And so when that happens, Mr. Thornton is holding on to her to, you know, make sure she's okay. Obviously, he's very worried. Like, he is smitten. He is a man that is gone for her, right? And he's very concerned about her. So the next day, or maybe several days later, he's reflecting about that moment with her. And more so, he's reflecting about his feelings about her. And he's saying to himself, there's never been anyone like Margaret. There's nobody like Margaret. And when he is saying that, he's recalling that memory of her being in his arms. And it's such a lovely, beautiful memory that he's having. The way he thinks about her is just such a, like, it's one of them, honestly, it's a very small section, but they're peppered throughout where you get his thoughts about her. And it's so romantic in a way that I wasn't quite prepared for, even though I feel like there are some of classics have some of my favorite romantic moments, even if they're not necessarily a romance. Like, I know Wuthering Heights is not a romance, but there are parts of that book that feel so deeply romantic to me. Pride and Prejudice, obviously. Sense and Sensibility, obviously. But even books like Anna Karenina, there are parts of that, even though it's all based around a love affair, there are parts of that that are so romantic. Just the way that the prose is written, the way that the words are put together, the way that people were thinking about other people back then. It's something that I think is probably a little bit idealized and definitely romanticized. But it's so beautiful, and we simply don't get that anymore. We simply do not have that anymore. And the reason I wanted to bring that up specifically, like, Mr. Thornton is holding Margaret in his arms. She's injured. He doesn't know if she's going to be okay. But when he's thinking back upon that, and he knows she's okay when he's thinking back upon that memory, his thoughts linger on things that he didn't allow himself to really linger on in that moment. Like how soft her lips were, how she felt in his arms, her soft body. But not in like a lascivious or a gross way, just in a very, like, protective and also just a very romantic way. The idea of that he wants to hold her. Oh my gosh, like, it's just so beautiful. That's one thing that I love about classics, is their ability to say so much with so little. Just a very little scene, right? Just these words that are so beautiful and so powerful, and they evoke such a strong emotion, but they're not using 100 words to say it, you know? That, I feel like that art is kind of lost. I really do. Because when I think about authors who write like that, you know, oftentimes they're, not always, but oftentimes it's literary fiction, and today literary fiction has a very specific tone that feels very hopeless, that shows the very ugly sides of humanity, whereas I feel like books like this, classics, a lot of classics, not all, of this time period, they were written in a way to show and to really, like, romanticize and to bring attention to the beautiful side of humanity, like the aspects of falling in love that don't drive people to do terrible things, because obviously that's not love anyway, but the aspects of falling in love that bring out the best in people. And that's exactly what I find most compelling about historical romance. Like, Lisa Kleypas does that so much. Mary Belloc does that so much. We're going to talk about her in just a minute too. But that's what this book is doing for me, and I'm so in love with it, you know? And just the complexities of the emotions, because there's also a scene in here, pretty close to that scene, where he's reminiscing and he's feeling, but he feels like this ache, this longing, because he knows that she doesn't want him because she's already rejected him at this point, or he believes she doesn't want him. And he's talking with her about her. He's talking about her with his mother, who's very stern and very protective of him, and thinks that nobody is good enough for him. And she is a little bit derisive about Margaret. And she makes some offhand comment about, well, she's in love with you. And the way it describes Mr. Thornton's emotions in that moment from the mother's point of view, he's just full of passion suddenly. But she can't quite figure out if it's hate or love or a mix of the two, or longing or despair even. And I'm just like, what an interesting choice of scene to have that exact scene right there, when his mother is almost derisively saying, well, she's in love with you, and he wants that to be true so badly, while at the same time he's so angry because of how she rejected him, and she gets to witness those emotions on his face and try to decide. And I'm just like, that's a freaking masterpiece. That is a freaking masterpiece. I'm loving this so much. So this has been a great reading experience. Obviously there are parts of this that aren't just romance, but those are what I'm choosing to talk about. You know, a lot is happening with moving the story forward, the things that it has to say about the industrial environment at the time, the workers in there. We've had a death that has happened. If you've watched the show, it's very tragic. It's caused by working in the mills and the cotton mills, and it's very, very sad. And I do feel like in the book, that death feels almost like it's more severe from the reader's point of view, just in the way that it's described with that same writing style of brevity, of being very selective with your word choice and how you're putting them together, and also just like the way that that just makes such a swift impact, like it hit its target right on. So I am having such a great time reading this. So I was reading this, okay? I want to circle back to when I was talking about the Ali Hazelwood, because it was very jarring, you know, to go from this, which is, you know, it's not exactly easy read. The way that this is written, it's a little bit difficult to see and notice who is speaking because there aren't dialogue tags. It shifts point of view, you know, within a scene. You'll be in, you know, Margaret's point of view, and then you'll be in Mr. Thornton's point of view, and it doesn't really tell you when that's happening. And also there are parts of this that are a little bit slow, that are over-explanatory things. There's commentary made on the state of workers at the time, and, you know, all of those things. So it's not exactly an easy reading experience, but it's worth it. So I was really, I'm circling back to the Ali Hazelwood talk right now, book. So I was looking forward. I thought the Ali Hazelwood would be a perfect sort of like counter piece to this, which is typically when I've read Ali Hazelwood, they're very easy reads. They're very quick, very easy to get into, you know, just kind of you get lost and flow into the story. So I picked up the Ali Hazelwood hoping that it would do that for me based upon what I've read from Ali Hazelwood in the past. So I haven't read Bride. I haven't read Love Theoretically. I guess that means I've only read two of her books, Love on the Brain, and the first one, The Love Hypothesis, which I enjoyed both of those. So this book, Not in Love, is, it was so disappointing. I mentioned I DNF'd it because it felt like it was very lust-based, very lust-driven, and I left a Goodreads review for it this morning. I don't give my DNFs a star rating, but I will put in there why I DNF'd, and I mark it as read, you know, because that's the only way you can leave a review. And I want to leave a review because I want other people to know what they're getting into. And I also feel like, especially with books like Not in Love, which I feel a sense of frustration, and that's potentially possibly my fault, because as soon as I left my review, which you can go look it up on Goodreads if you want to see it, you know, I was definitely talking about how it's very lust-driven, it's very, you know, sex-centric, and which just, to me, seemed like such a departure from the rest of the books in the series, which, while yes, they do have scene, that's not the overwhelming focus of the relationship. And that's not what I'm looking for in an Ali Hazelwood book. And also by the cover of this, I wouldn't necessarily expect this to be an erotic romance. Like, am I off the mark here? Am I off the mark here? So anyway, I left my review. I said why I DNF'd it, which is essentially what I'm telling you now. It was definitely more biting. You know, those reviews that I leave, they certainly are. And I don't make apologies for that, right? And I immediately got comments from a lot of Ali Hazelwood fans, and they're like, well, I guess everybody's entitled to their opinion. She did say this is an erotic romance, and to be fair, I didn't know that she said that. I feel like I haven't really been paying close attention to hype or marketing buzz for upcoming romance books, especially if it's an author I've tried before. I'm just like, oh, I'll pick that up, you know? So perhaps that is my fault, that I did not know she is marketing this as an erotic romance, because had I known that, I never would have picked this up. But can we talk for just a minute about the mismarketing of this cover? If this is supposed to be an erotic romance, who thought this was a good idea? You know, obviously people think it's a good idea because it's going to sell, right? But when I think erotic romance, like, I think about, you know, Katie Roberts covers, even like Pam Godwin's covers, you know, which I know are indie, they're not traditionally published, but I'm just sort of like, what? Anyway, so the fact that I came from reading North and South, which was so beautiful and just so romantic, saying so much and making you feel so much emotion with such little words, and then I went to the Ali Hazelwood and it was just like immediately jarring, and I was like, what a sad parallel, right? Not that there isn't a place for Ali Hazelwood's books or for erotic romance. I am not saying that at all. What I am saying is that that was very clearly demonstrative to me of something that I have found to be increasingly frustrating with romance books currently being published, and works that I've read in the past. And I just sort of feel like, we've sort of left the plot of romance, if that's, anyway, I'm fully prepared to get a lot more hate on my Goodreads review comment, all of my negative reviews, especially when I comment about the steam. And I'm never commenting about how much there is, okay? Even though I did say this felt like it was lust driven. Moving right along. So, I'm not going to pick that book up again. That is a permanent DNF. There was a point when I was thinking maybe I'll give it another try. But then as soon as I started to get all the comments from... First of all, I don't understand why people feel the need to chime in on reviews and defend an author. Like, she's fine. My review isn't hurting her, And second of all, I'm just sort of like, if you feel otherwise, go write your own review. It's that simple, Interactions like this have reminded me why I took a step back from the book community, because no one, it feels like, that's not true. I'm making a gross generalization, but very few people are able to let other people have opinions. Like, everyone has to feel like they're right, this is my opinion. You don't have to agree. Nobody has to agree. This is my opinion, Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to get on here and preach. I was going to talk about the Mary Bellog book, and I'm going to talk about that right now. So I gotta go meet my husband for lunch in a bit, and I've got some packages I'm shipping right now. So I am about 27% of the way into the audiobook for the Mary Bellog, and I'm just loving it so much. It's narrated by Rosalind Landor. Is that her name? I feel like I may be pronouncing that wrong. She does such a great job narrating these. I just am having the best time. It's such a beautifully, slowly unfolding story of Jenny, who has a disability. She can't walk. She's in a wheelchair. And Ben, our hero, who is the byblow of the Ravenswood family. And it's interesting because he is also a widower. His wife that he met when he was in the war and he was fighting, they fell in love. She was able to go in the war and work as like a laundry woman. She died and passed away, and so did their son while she was giving birth to their second son. So he has a daughter, so he's a single dad, essentially. And in the beginning of the book, he is trying to find a wife. He wants to have a wife for practical reasons, like helping raising his daughter and, other practical reasons why a man would want a wife. But he wants that companionship. He misses the companionship he had with his wife. They were married only a short time, and he longs for that type of companionship. And so he's got a few women that he's got his eye on that he thinks he may, make a good wife for him. And he is not at all prepared for Jenny. Like, she is not on his radar at all. And it's not because she has a disability. It's because she is of such a higher station than he is, And so he is very much aware of that fact. And he's like, oh, she's not for me, So when they meet, they have this first meeting. He ends up seeing her when she's trying to walk on crutches. And it's such a beautiful interaction because he recognizes right away that she certainly wouldn't want somebody to watch her be doing that, probably, because it looks like she's new, she's learning how to walk on them. And also, he is sort of realizing, and certainly she wouldn't want me to be watching her, but what can I do? I can't run away. She's gonna know that I'm here. And I just find that his whole personality throughout the whole book up to this point, his regard for her feelings is so front and center. Like, he is so interested, not even interested, he is so concerned about her feelings and how she may feel, how his actions may make her feel. And it's just so beautiful. It's truly this beautiful thing. And for her part, and it is also interesting because they are having little flares of attraction while they're also having this connection, He goes to great lengths to try and get her to be mobile on her own, to provide a way for her to have some mobility, so she's not reliant on people pushing her wheelchair or moving her here and there. And so I also feel like this is such a beautiful sign of his feeling, but also the type of man that he is, and the fact that he would put so much time and research and effort into trying to find a way where she can be independently mobile. And I just find that to be absolutely beautiful. So this book is just so lovely. Now I will say that this book I feel like you really can't read out of order. This is a series you really have to read in order if you're new to Mary Bell Hogg's books, unfortunately, because there's just too much family history. And even though she does do a good job in the beginning of recounting what happened in books 1 and 2 and the family history that set the whole saga in motion, so technically you might not have to read books 1 and 2. I sort of would recommend it, though. But also, they're just really beautiful books. Like, book 2 is my favorite so far. I don't know where I'll fall with this one. But I also feel like Mary Bell Hogg is the type of writer where she relies a lot on internal monologue, internal dialogue, where the characters are sort of ruminating on things like past decisions, their past history. So in a way, she is getting you world information, like world building in that way, where it's essentially an info dump from the character's head. I mean, this is a type of info dump that I can get behind, and maybe that's because I'm super invested in the characters. Maybe it's because I'm just a huge fan of Mary and her writing. I really like her storytelling. It doesn't bother me at all to have it be a slower paced story. I actually definitely prefer that. And every time I pick up a Mary book, specifically this series, which feels even more slow moving than her other series that I've read, this series feels just like, it just feels like a calm oasis of a book where I am just listening to the story. I'm getting swept away. She is taking her time telling it, but it's done in a way that is still interesting, where each interaction that they're having is showing you a little glimpse that is furthering their relationship together, and it's just so beautiful. So that's where I'm going to leave this clip. I did not intend to talk for 20 minutes. I've got 15 minutes, and then I gotta go, but I will come back when I have finished one of these books and let you know my thoughts. Hello, friends. Looking at my microphone back. We're gonna pop the top of this. Hopefully that wasn't too loud. This is... I gotta remember to hold the mic. I know you're supposed to pin it on your shirt, but I think it sounds weird. This is my favorite new non-soda drink, even though it's still sparkling. So let's wrap everything up, shall we? I finished North and South, and I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was amazing. I think that I was super impressed with how closely, I know I mentioned this before, the BBC adaptation followed the book, because the book was so easy to get into because I had seen the BBC show before. I knew all the characters. I could picture them in my head. I remembered scenes as they were happening. Obviously, I had forgotten quite a few scenes, Something that I actually forgot a lot about this story is how bleak that it is. There's a big portion of this towards the end, like maybe the last third, that just feels very bleak, and you don't know how in the world things are going to pan out. And obviously this isn't a romance, so there is no guarantee of a happily ever after. And I was kind of curious to see how, if at all, the ending would differ from the show. So I was kind of a little nervous and hesitant. And, Jen from the Book Refuge and I, we were buddy reading this. And there was a point when we were like, the day before our final chapter, she had broken it up into chapters for us to read each day. And she got to this point and she's like, I'm just going to finish. I have to have a happily ever after, And when I got to that point, I was like, I can see why, because there's a lot of death. There's a lot of, feeling like Margaret is kind of hopeless, and you don't know what her future is going to hold at that point. And I think Margaret really struggles with a feeling of regret for some of the choices that she made, and regret for some of the choices that she kind of felt like she was forced to make because of situations, or like this whole thing with her brother, how she had to protect him, and how that ended up being almost like catastrophic, but also how that that showed such a side of Mr. Thornton that we really needed to see, how he was a good man. Like, I just loved this. I thought it was so great, despite how bleak it is. I just adored it. So I gave it 5 stars. And I think it's one of the most romantic classics that I've ever read. In my opinion, I feel like Jane Eyre is super romantic. Obviously, Jane Austen's stuff. I do personally feel like Wuthering Heights is romantic, even though it's tragic and toxic. I think there are some things in there that are just So romantic, but this was just fantastic, and I had a great time reading this with Jen. She had some really good insights and discussions, and I really enjoyed that. So that was fabulous. And like I said, like I haven't read a classic recently, and they used to be my bread and butter. I used to read them all the time, and it felt really nice to just sort of slip back into that, and it was great. It was a good time. So I enjoyed that. So then I finished Always Remember by Mary Bellog. I just finished that today, actually. And, this is like something like a 12-hour audiobook. I listened to the audio and it went by really, really quickly for me. There was actually a point where I was just like listening and enjoying it, enjoying the story, enjoying the family saga. I really enjoy Mary's works. I think they're very much introspective. Like there's a part of them that, she writes her characters to be very introspective. And so when I mentioned earlier, there was like info dumps, that's where that really comes into play. Because a lot of the stuff that you're learning about the characters' past and about their characters' desires is from the characters themselves, very like reflecting on that. And I also think that that really echoes a lot of what classic literature does too. There's so much introspection in there. The characters are in their heads, they're thinking things, and then you as the reader get that information too. But I don't mind that at all. And specifically because I am so familiar with Mary's works, and this series is something that I love. I know all of the family. I had a good time. I really had a good time listening to this, but there was a point, I think I was like 75% of the way through or something. And I was like, have they kissed yet? Like what's happening with the romance, And, I wasn't really sure how far along in the book that I was at that point until I looked then and I saw I was at 70%, and I was like, wow, this is a really slow moving romance. And it's a slow moving romance, but there's also not a lot of focus on romantic moments. There are some, but they're kind of sparse. And for me, I feel like this isn't my favorite romantic moments work that Mary has ever done. I think that this romance is not my favorite, and I'm so bummed because I was so hyped for this with, Jenny and Ben. I thought this was going to be just fantastic. And maybe that's partly my fault that I came into this just too hyped up. I just felt like for sure I was going to love it. Is this working? Okay, I had to check to see if the green light was still on. So now I didn't hate this at all, but I think that book 2 in this series is my favorite romance. I do still enjoy the series. Book 2 is a 5-star. This one I think is a 4-star. And I also feel like maybe one of the reasons why it's not super romantic is because their relationship evolves from friends to lovers. This is very much a friends to lovers romance. But I feel like this is definitely more historical fiction family saga than a straight historical romance. And I still really enjoyed it. I really do like it. And Mary can write some really beautiful romantic scenes. But so much of this book was focused on their friendship that was developing and growing, and the way that they respected and appreciated each other. And they really kind of balked at any type of a romantic relationship. Ben, because he doesn't feel like he's worthy of Jenny because of, not her title, but her standing in society. And because Ben is illegitimate, he just feels like no one is ever going to let me marry her. I can't even consider her as a wife. And I also feel like because of Ben's history with his previous wife, which was really more just a comfortable relationship, he wasn't deeply in love with her. But I also never felt like he was deeply in love with Jenny, which is disappointing because I really, really wanted this to be swoony, romantic, like weak in the knees, and I just personally didn't get that. And I do feel like that's largely because of the hesitation that they both had. Jenny's hesitation was, is he going to want someone who has a disability as a wife? Like she struggles with that a lot. She feels like she's not really worthy of him. And he, meanwhile, is struggling with, I can't be with her. Like nobody wants me to be with her because I'm illegitimate. I don't have the same social standing. And so that was taking up a huge portion of the book. And the moments where they were together, where they were like falling in love, were kind of few and far between, but they also lacked impact. I feel like those scenes really lacked impact for me. And that was also slightly disappointing. So it's 4 stars. It's still a solid read. It's still like, I had a really good time reading this. I was about to say great, but it wasn't quite great. I had a really good time reading this because, I love her writing style. I love her audiobooks. And I just was having a good time listening to this and not even really paying attention to where I was in the book, just clocking it and being like, yes, okay. And then I'm like, but what about the romance? I just don't feel like it's happening. So I liked how we got some resolution to the characters' pasts, and things that have happened in the past. We see a lot of resolution in this book surrounding like the scandal that their family had that kicked everything off in book 1, surrounding Ben's parentage, and there were a lot of like some of those questions that were answered. So I did really, really enjoy that. But yeah, 4 stars for this one. A little disappointing, honestly, but not too bad. And then I did make some progress with The Way of Kings, this much. So this is like 1,007 pages. I'm on page 300. That's pretty good, 310. And I will probably do just a whole video review on this because it's going to take me so long to read. But I will say that despite all the differing timelines and the different characters and the different names for the fantasy world, I'm finding this very easy to read. It's very engaging. Like, I constantly want to be reading this. I really, really do. And I've been reading it for 2 weeks and I'm 300 pages in, but I am loving it. And I fully understand the hype and I'm only that far into it. So I'm having a good time reading this. So that's all, my friends. Thank you for watching this vlog. I hope y'all enjoyed it. If you have made it this far, please feel free to leave me a bug emoji if you can find one. If not, some type of flower or plant, because I'm in my basement. I've never filmed down here before. I'm facing my backyard right now and I see a bunch of plants and I don't see any bugs, but I know they're out there. So all right, my friends, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate y'all, and I'll see y'all in my next video.